this funny feeling when you stand in a place, a large, complicated place, and it clicks back to a drawing that you had made 25 years ago. A rendering, you know how you always try to show what it will feel like when the project is early on in the concept stages? And there it was, finished. And now I was standing in it with my son.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of I Know This Guy, the podcast where we dive deep into the lives of some of the most interesting people I know. Before we get started, please like and subscribe to I Know This Guy wherever you get your podcasts. By the way, my kids want me to say something about ringing a bell. What the hell's a bell?
So when's the last time you had a 25-year-long project, Dad?
It was you. It was you.
I'm sorry.
You were my 25-year project.
And how do you feel about it? Pass or fail?
No. It was an absolute incredible journey from day one to now. How's that?
That's great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dad.
You want a virtual hug?
Yes, yeah. Virtual hugs. Got to add that feature.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, super excited to talk to today's guest.
Now, this all started from Philip, right? Philip Yang.
Yeah, Philip Yang coming through. How many guesses has he given us?
I don't know. He just keeps giving us guests. But this guest is a little bit different because he was the original person that Philip said, hey, look, I got to reach out to Alex and see if he will go on to the podcast. He wasn't sure. But in the meantime, he just keeps giving us guests that are incredible. Anyways, Alexandros Washburn is incredible. 25-year project. But wait, he's got some really cool stories. But that YouTube video he dropped on us, I got to check this out. The Hidden Island in New York. I really do want to check it out.
Yeah, this one has a built-in treasure hunt for all of our listeners out there.
Yep.
We need some kind of prize or something if anyone figures it out.
Yeah, perfect. But no, I can't wait. This is an interesting, and I use interesting, the word interesting a lot, but this guy's done so much. And, he's helping out, really helping out society, with what he's doing. So, I'm looking forward to just diving into it and talking and, discussing all these different things that he's done.
All right. Well, let's get right into it.
All right. So welcome to the show, Alexandros.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure speaking to you from Brooklyn.
Yeah, it's great. We didn't know if we'd get you onto the podcast. I know Philip Yang, we were talking to him and he was saying, I'm going to try. I don't know if I'll be able to get him to come onto the podcast, but we're certainly happy that you made it.
Thank you. And Philip's a great guy. And interesting that we're doing this via podcast because I always connect with Philip. Anywhere in the world, I just see him more often, as much as I see other friends, but he's everywhere. He's based in Sao Paulo. But somehow he's in Toronto and he's in Washington and he's on the internet. So he's one of those people who projects his presence.
He's also one of these guys that are just amazing. Like when I talked to him a couple months back, I had no idea that we would just be going on for hours. And, he was just such an interesting, nice guy.
But yeah, interesting and nice typically don't intersect, but with him they do. Smart, very, very hyper smart. Last time I guess I was in his apartment in Sao Paulo and he was showing me he had built an interior wall that he could move with a drill gun and turn a crank to reveal a grand piano behind it. And and of course he had fascinating neighbors come and visit, and it just went on and on and on, and then they brought out bottles of scotch and this and that, and then at the end around I don't know, when was it? In the AMs, 2, 3, who knows? Philip looked at me and said, "Well, Alex, you learned a lesson about Brazilians tonight." He said, "The French, always leave and never say goodbye. Well, the Brazilians say goodbye and never leave.
Yeah.
Welcome to Sao Paulo.
Yeah. So let's dig into your backstory a little bit. One of the things that we like to bring out in this podcast is, what makes Alex Alex. So can we dive into that a little bit?
Wow, that could be a that there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of room to dive in, but
Let's
what
dive.
makes Alex Alex? What makes Alex Alex? Well, my whole life is about cities, and cities are incredible. The cities are everything. They touch everything. So I kind of feel, both lucky and kind of challenged because there's nothing that isn't interesting, and you've got to find out about everything. But there's only so much time in the world. So it's somehow or other when I was little, I just came to love living in a city. Maybe that actually probably has a lot to do with my mom, who was Greek and lived through World War II and then the Greek Civil War, and then came to the US for grad school, met my dad, who got a job at the Smithsonian Museum in DC, and they moved to DC in the 60s. And my mom saw Capitol Hill and these beautiful old decrepit row houses, and just 3 blocks from the Capitol, and decided that's where we're going to live. And my dad and all the friends said, "Are you crazy? You can't live downtown. It's a slum. It's dangerous. It's whatever." And my mom said, "Look, I've just been through World War II and a Civil War. This is we're 3 blocks from the U.S. Capitol." So I grew up there, riding my tricycle around the U.S. Capitol, where we saw all the things, around the Supreme Court when I was a toddler, and just have never left Center City since then. And yes, people were exaggerating that perhaps, but it was dangerous. There were a lot. I remember a lot of ups and downs, but I think it kind of started me off living downtown, loving downtown in a time when downtowns were really, really under pressure. White flight, economic collapses, kind of the vicious cycle. And remember, this is like as a 5-year-old. I mean, I'm not analyzing this with an Excel sheet. I'm just sitting there wondering, like, how come I don't have anybody to play with? Or, I remember like, I remember making a toy gun out of Lego to go play. That's like one of my earliest memories. And then when I came back to Capitol Hill to raise my family back in the 90s, it was the middle of the crack epidemic. And, there were 21 murders within about a 10-block radius of my house. And I was, I just graduated from Harvard Graduate School of Design and Architecture. Got a job at the Firm of the Year Award in Architecture in Washington. And no matter what we did as architects, the city just kept getting worse and worse. And I really couldn't take it. I mean, I was like, what could I do? How come architecture? I went to school for all these years. We're being told, oh, the aesthetics, the design. Yes, it's all about that. You must worry about everything from the doorknob to the spire, and that's your life. It's like, this is not my life. The architecture keeps getting better, the city keeps getting worse. That's not what architecture should do. Architecture should be a tool of building cities. Something is wrong with this picture. And that's probably where I got my first real break, is out of that kind of desperation. Because I was seriously thinking of becoming a cop, just to protect my family. But I decided, well, wait a second, let's see, maybe government might have something to do about this, about cities, about architecture. And everybody told me there's only one person in government who could give a bleep. I don't know if you have bleeping devices or not, so I can self bleep if that's helpful. But who could? There's only one person in American government who cares about architecture, and that's this guy, Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan. So through some family friends and connections, I got an unpaid internship in his Senate office. And he was an incredible person. I don't know if anybody, knows the details, but I mean, you could do podcast upon podcast about his life, but when I met him, he was in the latter part of his career. He was a chairman of the Senate Committee on Finance, the tax writing committee. He was definitely one of the most powerful people in Washington. And I just got this job writing memos in the back. And one day he read this memo and that he liked the writing, and he said, "Who's this Washburn fellow?" And they said, "Oh, he's this architect we got in the back." He said, "I've got an architect in the back. Bring him in. I want to meet him." So he met me, he liked me, and then he hired me as the only architect on personal staff in the US Senate. And a little background on him, he grew up viciously poor in Hell's Kitchen during the Depression. His dad had left the family, and then they had to fend for themselves. He then went through public schools and got scholarships, and he ended up actually professor at Harvard. But he gave that up to run for the Senate, and he won. And this is a person who was unlike any senator we have now. I mean, he would write books for a vacation. He would, he could he 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 could smell. You could never bullshit him. You could never make up something to tell him if he asked you a question, because he could smell. He could just smell ignorance like a shark smells blood, and then he would just chomp. So he was an incredible figure, but he had a love of architecture. And I had this incredible period where my official title was, advisor on public works. But I was getting all the advice. He'd invite me out to lunch and ask me questions about architecture and urban planning, and then he'd tell me how he did something to get something done 20 years ago in New York City, and all these things. I was wondering, like, okay, I mean, I loved it, but I was getting all this sort of this attention, that the other staff would stand in line with their memos, and I'd be going to lunch, and then he told me, like, okay, here's your job now. You go to New York and you get Penn Station built. And now I realized, this is where the training was coming from. Like, he was telling me what he had learned in a lifetime of building in a city. And what he learned was that nothing comes easy. And sometimes nothing comes at all. And that if you want to get anything done, anything big done, you've got to have three things come together: politics, finance, design. He loved design, but he knew that that was the weakest force. And he was in politics, and he had power. So he sent me up to set up a corporation to rebuild a part of Penn Station. And that was my job for the next, how many years of my life, to kind of parachute into New York, into a Republican, he was a Democrat, but into another party's offices, and convince them that turning the old post office into a new train station was a worthy goal, and the city, state, and federal government should join together to get this done. Well, we got it done, but it took 25 years. It just opened last week. And that was an incredible struggle, that I was simply the first runner in the relay race. I was the one who set up the corporation, set up the first design, got the first funding, got the plan approved, and then I went back to being an architect. And then a series of others carried the torch through ups and downs, through 9/11. There's a whole story about how that almost killed the project. We're in Midtown, but 9/11, of course, was downtown. But the post office, the only two large post offices, were either the one we were sharing or the one downtown. And when the one downtown was destroyed, the post office tried to pull out of the project. But anyway, we persevered, and others kept going, and a whole series of people. And the last president of this Moynihan Station Development Corporation, great guy, great guy, Michael Evans, he's the one who got it over the finish line. Sadly, he died, before he could see it done, and very tough circumstances. But let's just say it's now open. My job was to make it inevitable. It happened, but it taught me some very, very serious lessons is that we can't take so long. If we're going to change our cities in time for climate change, in time for social change, if we're going to keep pace with the world around us, we've got to start building cities better, faster, more accurately. We don't have the luxury of 25 years to build a train station. So anyway, what makes Alex Alex? I don't know. Life makes Alex Alex, right?
I'm interesting. That was a long, huge project that you put together. What did it feel like the day after it was completed?
Oh, it felt wonderful. I went down there with my family, and I have a young son, a 3-year-old son. I also have an older daughter who's now the same age as the station, right? Because we had her when I first came up. To just tell you how long it took. But anyway, I went with my young son and stood there with him on my shoulders and saw this funny feeling when you stand in a place, a large, complicated place, and it clicks back to a drawing that you had made 25 years ago. A rendering, you know how you always try to show what it will feel like when the project is early on in the concept stages. And there it was, finished. And now I was standing in it with my son. And that, it's belated accomplishment, but that is the feeling that suddenly, gathers for you the sort of the enormity of the city, the task, the timeline, the effect of all this. And the gratitude you have to have for everyone else, Michael, others, John Gerber, Robin Stout, Michael Royce, other presidents who took the baton and did their lap. And this world needs better cities, better public works, better public spaces, and it takes so much passion and so much effort just to keep that vision alive through the election cycles, through the financial crises, through to opening day. And maybe that's why our cities aren't as good as they should be right now. Maybe that is too much to put on an individual or even an individual authority. Maybe this is something that has to be raised to more of a societal goal. Like you wake up in the morning, you say, like, I want a better train station. And it's not just one person saying that or one organization. It's like everybody in effing New York City. Like, I respect me. Give me a better station. I will build a better station. This is my city. This is my life. This is what we're going to do. So, maybe the big lesson of Penn Station and Moynihan Station and all its ups and downs, if I could wish anything, it would be that it inspires everybody to say they want something better and to act on it.
How much did you have to give? Like if you had that vision, it's 100% that vision. At the end of the day, did you have to give, and I'm not talking money wise, but did you have to give to take? And I'm talking about more on the political side. Were there issues that came up that, okay, you couldn't do what you wanted, you had to kind of do it this way, or you just couldn't do certain things you visualized
Yeah.
at all because of political issues or whatever it could have been?
So you bring up a really great point, and that's why it's so hard indeed. But so here, this is the trick. Yes, you have a vision, but that's not where you start. Where you start are with values. The vision expresses the values. And we were very, very lucky that we had, I mean, lucky is not the word, it's the only way, it's the inevitability, it's the requirement. Moynihan had a set of values that he was trying to instill in us. Let's go back to his childhood, talking about overcoming things. Okay, here he is, this really poor, really tall, really smart guy. And his job was shining shoes. and he would have to shine the shoes of millionaires, and he would shine the shoes in Penn Station, in this glorious old station that was then torn down, thrown away in the Jersey Meadows. And being in that great space taught him something, elevated something. He felt an equal with anybody's that he was, even if he's there, bent down, shining their shoes, he was their equal. Public space made him their equal. Public space of that grandeur was as much his as the millionaires. So he he was wounded by the old Penn Station being torn down, which I don't know how much your listeners know about that story back in the 60s. The greatest train station in the world, the equal of the Baths of Caracalla, an incredible feat of engineering and architecture, was torn down and tossed away in the Jersey Meadowlands to put Madison Square Garden in a pretty shitty office building. You know, it was an air rights deal. And Moynihan wanted to change that, to get back to that situation where we would not accept a subterranean train station, a subterranean public space. We would demand a public space that made everyone elevated, because the effect of that is that public space builds public trust if and only if everyone goes everywhere. And when anyone can go into the greatest room in New York on equal footing, then you have achieved your values, your goal. So the vision, what it looked like, yeah, that has to express that. But if it doesn't have those values built into it, it's nothing. It's nothing. So yeah, the ups and downs of the design, there are a lot of compromises made. But the original designer of the Penn Station, this guy, Charles Follen McKim of McKim, Mead and White, he had a great saying. He said, you could compromise everything but the essence. So it was my job to find that essence and make sure it was part of our values, and then build it in to a system that would result in eventual inevitability. I never thought it would take 25 years. But here we are, and I think if you go to that station, yeah, you will feel empowered. You will feel the equal of anyone around you. You will feel a New Yorker.
Some of the challenges that have come up over that 25 years, let's talk about it. What were some things that people just don't realize happened while you were putting this all together?
My God. Well, the first thing, of course, was the attacks on 9/11. We had just a few months earlier passed our general project plan, gotten our budget together, everything, all the deals were signed. It was ready to go out to the private sector for actual construction. And then the attacks happened. And first there was this, the New York Times headline, post office to pull out of the Farley deal, and we just went nuts. And so we activated all of our background network. Moynihan has an incredible network of former Moynihan staffers. I mean, you'd be amazed, like where everyone is, from Kevin Sheekey over at Bloomberg to Lawrence O'Donnell on MSNBC. These are all Moynihan guys, and Moynihan women as well out there. And when that happened, I was out of government at that point, but we just got the phones ringing, we got the network working, and the next day the New York Times reports post office changes position, the station will go forward. But the problem then was that the postmaster pulled out entirely before we had this deal where it was half train station, half post office, which actually makes a lot of sense from a transportation and infrastructure point of view. But now the deal had to be recrafted, and the deal makers were gone. I was out of there. So now the apparatus, the government apparatus, had to go back and rebalance, recalibrate. And that's pretty hard to do, especially, and this is what people don't know, that a chunk of our money got stolen and sent down to build the Oculus in the World Trade Center, the most over budget, over-the-top transportation facility that does so little for so few, but is a gold-plated selfie space that's very dramatic, but basically it's a train to New Jersey. And anyway, governor at the time wanted to make a statement down there, so he robbed Peter to pay Paul, and suddenly the Moynihan project not only had a planning hurdle, but now had a financial hurdle that took many, many years to overcome. But hey, it overcame it.
So those triangles in the background, that was a mirror, and you just hit your head against the mirror to make it shatter, right?
No. Yeah, but what's in the background? That's actually red hook detritus. That's stuff off the. Here, I'll zoom out a second. I live
Sure.
in this wonderful neighborhood called Red Hook, Brooklyn. That's very, very creative. And one of my neighbors was building something out of triangles, and he did it out of plywood triangles, and he was getting ready to throw away the waste here. And I said, no, it's beautiful. The triangle holes are just as beautiful as the triangles. So let me take those back. So I keep them now. And,
That's yeah.
So it's pretty cool.
So it's not a smash mirror.
No,
from
no, it's
banging your head. No.
yeah.
Well, I am sure that there's probably a few mirrors out there that you've smashed because of these issues.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to kick your way ahead. And you know what? Moynihan always, it's interesting. Moynihan's, he knew that this might be coming, where somebody would try to steal the money. And he once called me and said, Alex, Penn Station is a fat dolphin in a sea of sharks. And I think it's only in the last maybe even month or so that the general public is starting to realize what Moynihan said all his life, that politics is a dangerous place. Politics, finance, design. Politics is the strongest force. It's also the most dangerous force. It's also the one with the most risks and the most pressure. So, yeah, to get a political goal, you very often have to be very, very direct and and strong, let's say. And I'll bring up, here's another quote. I'm sorry, I don't mean to just be a quote machine here, but I was a professor for 3 years, so I've got a little bit of that. This is something for all other students of government. Here's a very important quote that I think came from President Eisenhower. He said, "Government is not chess, it's checkers. Don't overthink it." Yeah, so breaking mirrors, breaking doors. Basically, the secret of success in government is to hound people to the point where saying yes is just so much easier than saying no and having you show up again the next day and hound them some more.
So that's the secret.
Yeah, I guess maybe there are a lot of secrets. There are a lot of secrets. Some of them actually kind of sad secrets, but this sense of persistence is a prerequisite when you're operating at the time scale of city building. And I've worked a lot on the Moynihan project, but from different perspectives. Yeah, one time I was the founding president, so I got I had the official pulleys and levers. But then I was out of government for a while, and then for a while I was a chief urban designer in New York City with a city agency that didn't have the financial pulleys and levers, but now suddenly I had some other pulleys and levers. So I was able to, push again from there, and then working on the High Line through the Department of City Planning as well. Some more. So, it's what's a good, maybe like a mathematical analogy. I don't know. The concept of strange attractors in fractal mathematics. These points that just keep pulling and organizing seemingly random events around them into a coherent pattern. It's kind of what you have to have. Is you have to become a strange attractor. You have to. What I liked when I was at city planning, and I had this great title, chief urban designer. Wow. But I said, look, I control nothing. My job is to influence everything. And yeah, but you never stop.
I want to go back, and it's only because I watched a show the other day on Netflix. Okay, so new docu series out there called Crack. You said that you originally lived in the row houses in Washington. You went away, came back. How long and how bad did you see it affect your neighborhood? How long did it take for your neighborhood to collapse with crack?
Well, look, so people thought the '60s and '70s were bad. That's when I was growing
Mm-hmm.
growing up, but the late '80s, early '90s were the worst. They were unparalleled. We even had a mayor. You probably heard about our DC mayor, who himself was a crackhead.
Hey, you haven't heard about the Toronto mayor.
Ah,
No,
okay.
maybe you have.
Okay. Well, then, there we go. We got something in common here. But, the neighborhood never actually collapsed, right? That's something. It's resilience. Okay, there's another whole chapter. Actually, here I wrote a book about resilience. The nature of urban design, a New York perspective on resilience. But I was talking about resilience to flooding after where I live now got flooded by Hurricane Sandy. But there's the same resilience to other floods and epidemics and crack or viruses or finances. There's something about a city. There's something about the people who want to live in a city that enables them to overcome just about any obstacle and overcome better. That's the key to it, is that you never try to get back to almost as good. No, your vision, your values are always to get back better. And whether it was a crack epidemic in the '90s or later the hurricane, I felt that way amongst my neighbors. Uh, no surrender, no surrender. And I think that's again, it's part of persistence. But you keep that attitude and it's shared by enough people that whatever you face, you will overcome it. Now it has to be true though. You can't pretend. You can't fake the problem or fake the solution, especially at the level of cities. Like in federal politics and stuff. There are all these things that nobody can prove or disprove if you're just you and me. Like, is our military big enough? Like, how do I know? But at a city, you can see it. Did somebody pick up the trash? Yes or no? Is there broken glass on the street? Are there potholes? Yes or no? Is my train on time? These are things that are instantly verifiable about a city and which give city politics very little leeway for the sort of lying, fibbing, call it whatever you will, theater that we're used to or become used to now. So here's yet another thing I love about cities and why I think cities will lead the way is that it's a reality check. It's what you call in science a ground truth. And how we reacted to the reality of the flood of Hurricane Sandy, where I'm sitting right now, there was water would have been above my head. This is the ground floor of my house in Red Hook. That was a reality, measurable, documented, and we reacted to that reality as a neighborhood through our social cohesion, through our social resilience, and we overcame that. Now we need a lot of physical resilience to be added to our community. We need seawalls and other physical things that we can do. But it's reality based and it's now community based. So wow, I've just sort of kind of like taken you now through this arc where this is sort of interesting. So I started out my career in Washington at it's like the Capitol, going to the White House with the senator, and now I'm here in a little neighborhood in Brooklyn, working out of my house, and I couldn't be happier because I think that this is really the arc of politics. This is where it's most meaningful and most useful is right here.
Let's hook back to Sandy for a second. So horrible hurricane came through. New York was, yeah, it was devastating.
Uh-huh.
Did they ever do anything to prepare for the next hurricane?
You know, people have been doing well. The short answer is not enough. And the reason I know that, like, after Hurricane Sandy, I wrote, I wrote this book that tried to analyze how cities can be resilient, what makes a city resilient. And then when Mayor Bloomberg left, I left as well. Because remember I was telling you politics, finance, design. There's nothing as urban designer, chief urban designer, I could do that without his, true political will would make a difference. So, I realized that with him leaving, the political will was going to be impacted. And I'm very lucky in my career to have been able to work for both Moynihan and Bloomberg, because what Moynihan taught me, Bloomberg gave me an opportunity to practice, at the scale of a city. I just can't thank the mayor and that opportunity enough, and the senator for teaching me those values. But after that, I found myself in this position where, hey, what we're dealing with it's a little more technical here. I got to bone up on the science here, politics, finance, design. Well, the design now is engineering. I did a stint at the Stevens Institute of Technology, where my title was an industry professor of design. And I started a program called CRUX, Coastal Resilience and Urban Excellence, where we did three things. We took urban design, we took hydrodynamics, and we used, then, cutting edge computer modeling to help predict the interaction of cities and water. Stevens is a great institution. It's very much it's actually founded by the person who was one of the first people to put steam engines in boats. So it's right on the Hudson River, right across from Manhattan. It has a network of sensors throughout New York Harbor, the greatest network of sensors, and an incredible website, if you're ever interested in it, that will show you everything about the movement of the water in New York Harbor. And it's all the data is pulled down and then analyzed by them. So my colleagues there were great, because then I could work with these people who knew more about the movement of the water than anyone else. And then I knew an awful lot about the movement of the city. And then we were trying to put this into a framework of computer modeling, which, that was about 2014, let's say. And we were starting to use LiDAR and, making virtual models, digital twins, to try to work on. It was pretty cumbersome back then and pretty low resolution for when we would try to do our modeling. Now it's extraordinary. My God, just even in 2020, what's happened with AI actually starting to supplant physical modeling in complex dynamics is amazing. But I got a real dose of understanding the science behind water movement and the infrastructure of a city. And all I could say, though, is that academia, for me, the laboratory is the city. So I just felt, I felt odd not being in the city trying to fight for change, rather than being outside and pondering and teaching, which is great. And I love it. And I actually love the teaching part a lot. But it's funny about current academia how little of it is about teaching. It's another story. But so anyway, here's what I learned is that there are some very, very important hydrodynamic laws that cities have to deal with. And I ended up becoming a fellow of the Center for Livable Cities in Singapore, working a lot in Sao Paulo, their water issues. That's partly through Philip Yang, and all these interesting things, which have kind of culminated. If you're interested in this part of it, we have actually a solution to the storm surge and the problem of rising sea levels for Southwest Brooklyn. And you have to go to YouTube and type in "the answer is more Brooklyn" and my name, and you should get a video of a TEDx talk I gave about this island that we discovered. So I won't say anything more about that. It's kind of a little bit of a detective story, but there is a way to solve this problem for Brooklyn, and all it needs is a little bit of political will.
I'm curious.
Oh yeah, it's a great detective story.
I gotta check it out. I'm gonna check it out right after this podcast.
What is lurking just under the waters of New York Harbor? Something is there. Something that could change the course of New York's development.
Really?
Yep. But you got to watch to find out.
Okay, we're going to pause the podcast just for a sec. No. All right. Well, talk about a cliffhanger. Isn't that what Philip's done for the community? He was talking to us about a community that he's just basically put 3 classes together and they're working together for a better community.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Philip gets it. Philip knows this. And did he ever tell you about his app that works on making low-income housing more widely available through sort of a little bit of an Airbnb and a credit enhancement way of doing it? Oh, it's a I mean, that's something to talk to him about too. It's a way of addressing the housing crisis through a building up trust and confidence between people who need housing and maybe don't have as much money and people who have extra housing. So no, Philip gets it, and Philip is a unique person in just every way, and the world could use a lot more Philips.
I agree.
Thanks for listening, guys and gals. Make sure to tune in later in the week to hear the rest of the interview. As always, make sure to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We're on all of them. That's enough of me, and I'll see you next time.